The AP Lit girl within me, she has been reborn. That's all thanks to Guillermo del Toro's newest film, Frankenstein. I read Frankenstein my senior year of high school. There's something about this story that's really hard not to resonate with, despite the fact that it is an old book. It is 200 plus years old, despite the fact that you think you know the story, despite the fact that Frankenstein, especially in American culture, is prevalent every Halloween prior to anyone really realizing that that was a novel that is a very well-regarded piece of literature. And yet, this feels like the first time that this has been done so lovingly and perfectly, specifically within my lifetime, where we're not dealing with a Frankenstein with bolts in his neck and or a mad scientist, but really exploring the modern Prometheus that Mary Shelley wrote for the world in 1817. Literary teachers, language teachers across America are cheering, they are rejoicing because they will finally get to show a quality film adaptation to their students and have that be analyzed in much the way that I feel Baz Luhrmann's Great Gatsby did, and that I feel that The Crucible does. I feel like we have that, and I think that's such a crucial part of getting young teenagers into classic literature. And I know that a lot of people recently have been talking about another film that Jacob Elordi might be starring in that might not do that. So I think this is a win for the literary community as much as it is for the cinematic community. Why I think Guillermo del Toro is the perfect person to direct this and how I can't imagine it being done by anyone else is he understands how to create a vast, fantastical world that still feels grounded and rooted in history, real themes, and time periods in much the same way that he understands as much about what makes a great creature feature or monster movie as much as he does connect in his films with the core of humanity, of human empathy, of the emotions that make us human. And I think he does that so masterfully in this film. And I genuinely don't believe that anyone else could have made this film as perfect as he did. Like, this is genuinely, I'll spoil it, a 5-star movie for me. I cannot stop thinking about this movie. From the production design to the acting, which we'll get into later, the costuming is beautiful, and the imagery and just the thematics of this film really as a whole portrait of understanding this as a piece of literature, as a film that is faithful to that, but also takes creative licenses that I think expand upon the film. There are some changes to the film. I would say the general plot is the same as the novel, which I will not spoil for you in the event that you have not read the novel, but it is very much the same plot. The same major beats, I think, occur. The same major lines that I think are very important from the original exist here, but I do think there's a couple licenses that Del Toro and the creative team behind this film took that I think are really important. Specifically, I want to focus on Elizabeth's character because I think that is the most massive change from novel to screen. As I was refreshing myself on the novel I read so many years ago, I watched the Crash Course Literature starring John Green 2-part analysis of Frankenstein prior to watching this movie. Elizabeth serves as a very important supporting character for the story, and so beefing up her role for the film and casting someone as eccentric as casting someone as eccentric as Mia Goth feels very perfect. The way in which the changes are made. The story is very much about a man trying to, in many ways, further humanity, take the next step in a new generation without a woman, thinking that he is not only above God, but above the natural process of creating a child. And when, obviously he's not creating a child, but the way in which he's going about this, he is removing any of the biological, quote unquote, natural process of doing this, specifically for his time, which again, this film is very much kind of a fantasy world, but also very much set in like that 1800s. The novel itself was supposed to be modeled around scientific work being done at the time, and so that is a very real element of this film. But I think that this story, when it comes down to the debate of men playing God, creating sons for themselves without women, nature versus nurture, I think it's very interesting in this like unnatural parent story, right? This unnatural child of Frankenstein's creature. Having Elizabeth's role shift slightly from simply Frankenstein's future bride in the novel to a entirely more nuanced and backgrounded character, I think really plays well. And then additionally, kind of playing off of that in much the same way, Christoph Waltz's character, he is Elizabeth's uncle. His character is an entirely new creation, kind of created to provide explanation as to how Frankenstein maybe funds his projects and or as a tether from Frankenstein to the creature to Elizabeth and as a father figure kind of in reverse to Frankenstein. And I think to me, his character, specifically one very pivotal scene, again, which I will not spoil because it is not in the book, is one that I think really plays up the nature versus nurture argument of Frankenstein, of is the creature evil because Frankenstein is evil, or is the creature evil because he's been abandoned by his maker? And those type of things, or is he even evil at all? Is he just not allowed to be good? Like, all of these conversations that have been going on for over 200 years about this novel, I think are put into Elizabeth and Christoph Waltz's character. These two characters and their changes in the movie make this not just feel like a devoted adaptation of the original novel, but also of the analysis that has been discussed for 200 years now. And I think that's really incredible, especially when you are talking about adapting a classic piece of literature in a modern day 2025 context. You need to add something that is not just a person's interpretation of the original film, but something that also brings in the analysis of the world that has been formed by this publication. If I'm making any sense, I feel like I'm using big words and I'm not necessarily making sense. This film is as much about the discussions around the novel as it is about following the novel. And I really, really love that. Additionally, and this one is like a much more minor change that I personally enjoyed, because you pick up Frankenstein and all of a sudden, you know, you've only just wrapped your head around the fact that the creature's name is not Frankenstein, because that's what you've been told your whole life, and that it's actually his creator, the scientist, that's his last name. And then you're like, who is this Arctic explorer who is writing a letter to his sister? And why do I care about him? And I think that framing device is kept in the film for a very important reason, because it serves such a significant purpose in the book of like, what are the bounds of exploring new knowledge and pursuing things, even if they're dangerous, even if, like, just because you could doesn't mean you should kind of thing. They have adapted that to screen in a way that I think is really excellent and very cinematic, very visual. The first 5 to 10 minutes of this film will sweep you off your feet. Like, I was immediately like, this is a 5-star movie. And now a lot of that is because of the performances, which I said I would get into, and now I get to. God bless Oscar Isaac. Where is his Oscar for this film? You know, he genuinely embodies the spirit of Victor Frankenstein, of a man who almost gets caught up in this endeavor of knowledge of the possibility of science, that he is so blinded to his own actions, he cannot see his own faults, flaws, and places he should stop along his journey. But he does it in a way that is compelling, that is human, that doesn't just represent a man who's going mad, but a man who has good and bad within him. Not to quote Wicked, but I think this film very much factors into that conversation of, is a person born wicked, or do they have wickedness thrust upon them? That's very much how Victor feels in this film. And a lot of that is due to Oscar's performance, which he does beautifully. Despite how great his performance is, and despite how great Victor Frankenstein will be for eye candy for generations of literary students moving forward as they analyze this film in their lit class when their teacher is not slept well the night before and just needs to put on a movie. But the star here is Jacob Elordi, because listen, did I have questions that Jacob Elordi of The Kissing Booth, of Euphoria, of Nate Jacobs fame, was going to make his way into this creature role? And, you know, this kind of feels like it was born to be played by like Andy Serkis. But there's something about the quietness of Jacob Elordi's performance as this monster, which is crazy, because in the opening scene you'd be like, what do you mean quietness? Like, what are you talking about? But he uses his body and the sheer stature of him and his eyes to tell the story of this creature in a way that would not be able to be done by so many other people. Like, there's no way you do this performance, which is so essential to this film, of casting a real person to play Frankenstein and limiting the prosthetics to represent a man that has been literally put together by the body part scraps of other human beings, but to really just give him this humanity. Obviously, the design of the creature is really excellent and it develops throughout the film in a really beautiful way, but it's Jacob Elordi's performance that gets to the core of his humanity. And I think Guillermo del Torro saw something clearly there, him and his casting team, in Jacob Elordi, that I don't think any of the rest of us knew was there. But thank God he discovered it, because this movie is all the better for it. And I genuinely think there's something so natural about the way he embodies this creature that you almost aren't thinking about how good his performance is during it. But when you sit back after the film, you realize how incredible it is that he pulled that off. And I just love that. I loved this film. Like, genuinely from the bottom of my heart thought it was incredible. and to have such a love letter to movies, but also to literature at the same time, for that to all exist in one film, is really the genius of Guillermo del Toro here. And so there's no better way for me to end this than by giving you my own pretentious thoughts from right after the movie. Guillermo del Toro has reanimated Mary Shelley's classic novel with such a vibrant life force. It has now become a cinematic epic, one that will add context through its creative license for future generations to pour over this modern Prometheus. And with that pretension, I'll let you all go. Thank you all so much. I hope you have an absolutely amazing day or night whenever you're getting to watch this, and I will see you in my very next video. Bye, y'all.